Hello everyone, this is part 43 of What If Naruto and Hinata trained together and a spark happened, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Naruto scrambled away, to avoid being impaled. However, Orochimaru's sword continued to follow him, until Kusanagi's blade was almost 15 feet long. The Jian finally stopped growing, and Uzumaki regarded the sword with suspicion as he stopped backpedaling. Kitsune, the blonde teen, summoned his weapon and scabbard, and drew the staff blade. He tapped Kusanagi with the pole experimentally, hoping that a blade of the length to be either very flexible or very brittle. But the grass cutter was neither, bending just the right amount from the pressure Uzumaki applied. If you think this sword will be easy for you to break, just because of its expanding powers, you will be disappointed, the Sannin warned him, pushing Kitsune away and stabbing slightly towards Naruto's stomach. The Leaf Warrior knocked the attack wide, but Orochimaru angled the point back towards his opponent's shoulder. The staff blade blocked again, and in turn the Jian moved towards Naruto's knee. Maybe, Uzumaki conceded the point as he shifted his leg to avoid the jab, but at that length, all you can do is fencing-type moves, and you can't even get your full power behind them. The snake countered by turning Kusanagi slowly away from Naruto. The 4-meter-long ribbon of steel hummed as it flashed through the air, until it stopped, still resonating slightly, pointing to Orochimaru's right. The Sannin took 2 steps closer, and swung the extended blade as hard as he could at Uzumaki's neck. Kitsune intercepted the Jian, but the staff blade and its owner were knocked over by the impact. The teen rolled with the blow, and came up crouching, staring suspiciously at the body thief. Simple physics, Orochimaru answered the unasked question, circular motion is fastest on the outer edge, and force increases as speed does. Simple physics also say that sword should be too heavy for you to swing like that, Naruto growled back, especially if it still has the strength to be a viable weapon. Kusanagi is selective, Orochimaru shrugged, unable to deny the statement and slightly shocked Naruto even knew that. The Tokujo surged to his feet, charging towards his former teammate's body. The rogue drew back his oversized sword, and slashed out again. This time Uzumaki put both hands on Kitsune's grip, and leaned into the attack. This allowed him to absorb the impact and continue forward, scraping the Jian's blade along the junction of the staff and the crosspiece of his weapon. When he was within striking distance of Sasuke's sword arm, Kusanagi instantly returned to its regular size. Naruto stumbled slightly, having still been applying some of his weight to the grass cutter. He recovered even as Orochimaru stabbed at his chest. The fox-faced warrior spun past the blade, and angled his weapon's pole at the intersection of Orochimaru's left shoulder and neck, still wielding the staff blade two-handed. The snake caught the blunt weapon in his free hand, and smirked triumphantly at its owner. "You're not looking at my feet anymore," he noted, slashing his blade across the younger man's unguarded chest. Naruto released Kitsune as he stumbled back. The deep cut to his torso was not closing as fast as he would have expected, and Orochimaru's grin widened at Uzumaki's realization. The chakra already bonded to Kusanagi resisted Kabuto's anti-healing technique, the Sannin said, flipping Kitsune into his left hand, but I was able to strike a balance that should slow the fox down, enough to make you mortal. Now it was Naruto's turn to smile, finding it slightly amusing, if strange, that Orochimaru was unaware of his change in situation. He engaged the regeneration jutsu soon it had beat into him. He hoped the activate healing, combined with his Kekkei Genkai, would be enough to overcome the weakened version of the medical arrest technique. Sasuke's lips frowned slightly as the wound began to close more rapidly. The Sannin lifted both weapons as Uzumaki kicked up and tensed for another charge. Naruto jumped in, and Orochimaru stabbed Kusanagi at the young man's chest with an incredulous expression. Naruto slapped his hands together, trapping the slender blade between his palms. The snake just shook his head and sent chakra into the grass cutter to increase its length again. But before the point of the Jian hit Naruto's chest, the blonde's Ranshinsho reached Orochimaru's hand. The electricity caused Sasuke's hand to spasm, and the renegade released the sword. Naruto spun Kusanagi around, and caught the hilt. As he landed, he lashed out with the borrowed weapon, aiming for a shallow cut across both of Sasuke's thighs. Orochimaru blocked with Kitsune, staring at Naruto impassively. The weak attack stopped, the Sanin's eyes narrowed slightly, and he hissed, "Mine." Kusanagi wrenched itself out of Naruto's hands, and spun back around in midair to decapitate the teen. Kitsune, Naruto called evenly, and the staff blade disappeared from Orochimaru's left hand, materializing in its creator's right palm just in time to parry the hovering Jian. The flying sword jabbed, then weaved around behind Uzumaki, forcing him to choose between turning his back on Orochimaru or letting the grass cutter get behind him. Instead, Naruto swiped his empty hand across the still leaking cut in his chest. He sent his chakra into the crimson liquid, even as he rotated his body to track the dancing sword. Blood clone jutsu, Naruto spawned a single hemoglobin-based clone. The duplicate followed the retreating, signing Sanin, while the original engaged in kenjutsu with the legendary weapon. Spark darts, Orochimaru switched to a simpler technique, abandoning the more advanced lightning jutsu he had been forming, so he could launch something before the duplicate reached him. Cyclone spikes, the copy of Naruto countered. The two attacks did not interact at all, and both shinobi were forced to dodge as the weak projectile struck. Orochimaru hopped back, staring at the blood clone, hypnotically urging him, "Do that again." Doton, stone spears jutsu, Naruto announced, and spikes of rock exploded around Sasuke's body, but the expert shinobi was able to use the possessed teen's agility to avoid them. He landed on the largest protrusion, starting to sign again while using the Sharingan to order Naruto's duplicate, use a lightning jutsu. Odama Rasengan, the false Uzumaki formed the enlarged turbulent sphere and charged forward, shearing through the sharpened boulders he had dredged up. As his perch was destroyed, Orochimaru somersaulted forward, barely continuing his hand seals. "Why isn't it working?" The Sanin demanded of his Uchiha captive, not caring that he was not showing Sasuke the battle. Thus the teen did not know what Orochimaru was asking even if he were inclined to answer his captor. "You have done quite well, Naruto," Might Guy declared with hyperbolic pride. "There is only one more piece of the anti-Sharingan puzzle." "What's that, Guy-sensei?" the teen asked eagerly, despite his thorough exhaustion. "If you suddenly think of a way to attack Madara, do the opposite," the turtle summoner answered loudly. "I don't understand," Naruto frowned. "If you think you should punch, try to kick instead. If an air jutsu seems like a good option, try a lightning or fire jutsu instead." "I still don't get it," the Tokujo's eyes narrowed in thought. "The Sharingan can't force you to do anything," Guy explained, "it can just influence your moves, plant ideas in your head. By doing something completely different, you can disrupt Uchiha's plans. But you have to mix it up a little, because if you always do exactly the opposite, your opponent will catch on to that, too." "How do I do that?" Uzumaki nodded his understanding, but his look of concentration did not fade. "We'll work on it with some taijutsu," the Jonin offered. "I will start calling out attacks, and you try to do something that's not like what I say as quickly as possible. Are you ready to give it a try?" "I guess so, sensei." Naruto sounded slightly dubious. "The Sharingan is worthless against him," Orochimaru snarled to himself, "and his host, Tsukuyomi, and the hypnotic power don't work, and he hasn't hit me enough to warrant Sasori. I could try Amaterasu, but I'm worried the fox might have some way to counter that, too. All it can do is read his moves, which I could almost do without this bloodline. I can copy all of his moves except the Rasengan, but I already know every other technique I've seen him use. And he throws around so much chakra in his ninjutsu, that it makes up for the difference in our skill. I guess you'll just have to stop playing Uchiha and fight him as yourself," Sasuke finally answered, his voice dripping with contempt. But Orochimaru smiled both inside and outside at the taunt. "How right you are, Sasuke," Orochimaru said aloud. "That is the most obvious way to defeat your former teammate." Naruto's clone looked disturbed by the exaggerated betrayal. Then he shook it off, drew a kunai in each hand, and charged towards his opponent again. His head suddenly felt clearer, but despite that he ignored his initial plan to stab at the snake's shoulders. Instead, the facsimile threw a right snap kick, trying to decide if it was really his idea to follow it up by throwing one kunai and slashing Sasuke's knee with the other. His deliberations were of no use, as Orochimaru caught his attacking leg. Then the serpent's arm lengthened, wrapping around the duplicate's ankle, starting to crush it. At the same time his leg slithered out, and swept Naruto's left leg. With his other leg caught, the clone could not dodge and he crashed to the ground, his right hip partially wrenched out of joint by the fall. The Sannin launched another kick at the younger man's crotch, and Uzumaki had to take the hit with his free knee to avoid more vital damage. The blood clone tried to craft seals for a counterattack, but Orochimaru's other arm also extended and became serpentine, and the renegade pulled Naruto's hands apart, his nails digging into the Tokujo copy's wrist. Naruto parried, and once again had to stop short of slashing back meaninglessly. Fighting Kusanagi alone presented an odd difficulty, the remote-controlled blade could twist and slash in ways no human user could have. And, of course, there was no wielder to attack. Jiraiya's student had attempted to break the legendary Jian, but as Orochimaru had stated, the slender sword was much more durable than it appeared. Naruto caught the grass cutter again, and also struck harder than he would have if blocking a human opponent's swing. The thin blade spun with the force of his blow, and its hilt collided with his left wrist powerfully. Kusanagi shifted its axis of rotation, and its edge arced towards Uzumaki's neck. The teen ducked and knocked the hovering blade away, holding back his cracked arm while his Kekkei Genkai repaired the bone. Kitsune flashed out again, throwing the Jian further afield. The blonde Tokujo watched the grass cutter as it flew back towards him. Though he had a good grasp of its attack pattern, that didn't really give him a way to counterattack. This isn't working, he mumbled, getting into a sword fight against just a sword doesn't work. But why do I have to fight it as a sword? He took his staff blade in both hands, and batted Kusanagi's hilt, sending the Jian halfway to Hinata. Then he tucked Kitsune under his arm and carefully crafted a set of hand seals. Fire style, metal burn jutsu. Naruto activated one of the jutsus the Nine Tails had bequeathed him. But unlike his ill-advised use of the creeping napalm, the teen had discussed how this technique with his mentor, and even tested it a few times. A thin beam of intense yellow light emerged from his right hand pointer and middle fingers. It shot across the field, and hit the approaching Kusanagi in the middle of its blade. The steel instantly lit up, and a heartbeat later, over 1/3 of the sword was glowing yellow hot. Fuyuten, Tornado Lance Jutsu, Naruto overlapped the impact points, hoping the wind technique would damage or destroy the weakened relic weapon. But the drilling spear of green chakra merely cooled down the grass cutter, which reached him a handful of seconds later. The fox-faced youth took his weapon out from under his arm and parried Orochimaru's sword once more. Darn it, Naruto groused, I can't break it with Kitsune or ninjutsu, and if I try to grab it again, I doubt I'll be able to hold it any more than I could last time. Wait, I can't hold it, but maybe. He signed as Kusanagi pulled back for another strike. He hammered the Jian down when it tried to cut into his stomach. Hitsuji, he twisted his fingers, focusing his chakra intently. Then he caught up Kitsune again, and deflected the grass cutter's stab at his eye. Naruto called out the symbol of the boar, and then sidestepped the Jian, pounding on its hilt as it passed him. Tastu, Uzumaki created the final seal, and then incanted, Doton, Stone Claws Jutsu. Naruto's formation of the technique was drawn out not just so he could keep blocking, but also so he could reinforce the art and pour more chakra into it. 9 sturdy talons of stone exploded from the grass. 3 grabbed Kusanagi's hilt. 2 latched onto the grass cutter's cross piece. And the final 4 acted in pairs, each set sandwiching a different section of the Jian's blade in an imitation of the bare-handed blade block. The legendary sword struggled, but the 9, strategically positioned, stone hands were able to do what Naruto's one flesh and blood hand could not. They held Kusanagi fast. Great, Naruto grinned, now you just stay there, while I take care of your boss, owner, whatever. As he started to turn towards where his copy and the body thief were fighting, suddenly the clone's memories and remaining chakra flooded into him. He swung Kitsune around violently to ward off the charging Sannin. But Orochimaru's Sharingan was not focused on him, and when the renegade declared, forked lightning jutsu, all 3 lances of energy missed him. Instead that attack hit Kusanagi, shattering 2 of the claws on the hilt, 2 on the guard, and 2 on the blade. The remaining 3 rocky constructs were not enough to hold it, and the grass cutter sliced its way free. Naruto ducked under a punch from Orochimaru's serpentine fist, and warded off the dancing Jian with his staff blade. Fighting like a snake again. Uzumaki noted, glanced at his opponent's lengthened arms and loose, coiled posture, while also sorting through the clone's experiences. Indeed, the Sannin answered agreeably, your former teammate suggested I might have better luck fighting you with my preferred style, with some minor assistance from the Sharingan, instead of trying to fight like an Uchiha. Naruto frowned, and across the field Hinata took on an angry expression and clenched her right fist tight enough that her pointer and pinky nails cut into her palm. Sakura, however, looked deeply upset by the statement. Is Sasuke really working with Orochimaru again? She whispered uncertainly. Great, Naruto growled darkly, his expression not shifting, I was beginning to think you weren't taking me seriously. Oh no, I won't make that mistake again, the renegade shook his host's head. At the same time Kusanagi darted towards the blonde shinobi's chest, and the Sannin's left arm launched a whip-like forearm strike at the younger man's throat. Naruto caught Orochimaru's wrist with Kitsune, and tried to force the snake's arm into the path of the Jian. But the floating sword stopped short, and Sasuke's arm twisted free of its imprisonment. Hinata's lover blocked another slice from the grass cutter, and kicked out at Sasuke's torso. Orochimaru stepped back, easily avoiding the attack, and started to sign a new jutsu. Oh no you don't, Naruto grunted, spinning past the Jian's vertical slash and racing toward the Sannin. Kitsune pulled back for a diagonal strike. Kusanagi shot back in between them, forcing Naruto to slow down or risk losing his right arm. The Tokujo nearly stopped, then knocked the hovering weapon away before closing the distance. That bought the renegade the time he needed to complete his attack. Ninja art, poison cloud jutsu, Sasuke's pilfered voice intoned, and a thick purple mist emerged from his nostrils. Uzumaki skidded to a halt and flipped backwards, but not before he breathed in some of the gas. Coughing harshly, he weakly fended off another attempt by Kusanagi to impale him, while digging into one of the pouches in his uniform. The sealed pocket was very near the cut in his uniform, but fortunately was intact. He extracted a pill and jammed it into his mouth, grinding it between his molars before swallowing it. His gasping quickly settled, and the pain eased from his face. I see you came prepared, the snake summoners smirked slightly, try this, Kaiten, blazing fastball. He pantomimed an overhand throw, and when he finished the motion, a 2.9-inch diameter sphere of flame rocketed at Naruto. The younger man stepped into the pitch, Kitsune swinging. The blonde warrior drove it in a straight line back at his former teammate's stomach. While Orochimaru dealt with the deflected ball, Kusanagi flashed down again, nearly taking off Naruto's ear, and still managing to cut deeply into the teen's left shoulder. The wound started to close, more quickly than was natural, but still slow for the former Jinchuriki, and Naruto realized that somewhere along the way he had let the healing jutsu lapse. Instead of renewing it, Uzumaki tried to create more clones, but a powerful blast of air from Orochimaru and quick slice at his knees from the grass cutter disrupted him. How am I supposed to fight two of them at once? Naruto grimaced. Doesn't this violate the one-on-one terms of the duel? Sakura demanded anxiously. But Hinata sadly shook her head, no. Kusanagi is not independent, the silver-eyed girl answered, Orochimaru is controlling it directly with his chakra. In some respect, it is less of a second attacker than one of Naruto's clones. You're no help, the medic complained. Sorry, Hinata said absently, still more focused on the fight. Naruto palmed a shuriken and pushed Kusanagi aside so he could throw the star at Orochimaru. That disrupted the snake's next jutsu, which seemed like it would have been a lightning or wind technique. The young man had discovered he could stop the snake's attacks in this way, but knew it was an imperfect defense, and more importantly, a limited one. He still had nearly a dozen kunai, almost twice as many shuriken, plus a handful of smoke bombs that might do in a pinch. But after those, he knew he would be in trouble again. As the grass cutter missed his nose, Naruto noticed something he hadn't seen before. A tiny line in Kusanagi's blade caught his attention. That's where I tried to melt it. Naruto felt a glimmer of hope. It looks like I did some damage to it after all. Now, if I can just. Suten, water burst, Orochimaru incanted quickly, taking advantage of Uzumaki's reverie. Windblade, Naruto commanded Kitsune, and then sliced through the liquid sphere. The mass of water reflected the burnt umber of the skyline at him, but despite that Minato's son was able to block Kusanagi's heavy blow, hitting the mark on the blade with the green chakra edge. Then he attacked the floating blade again, absently throwing two daggers at the Sannin. Still not enough, Naruto decided silently, determining that the dancing sword was in no worse shape after 2 more attacks. In that case, he quickly ran his left palm up Kitsune's length, and the chakra projection changed under his hand. The extension ceased to be smooth and sharp, and instead became shifting and turbulent. He parried another slash by the flying blade, and it may have just been his imagination, but he thought the mark in the legendary weapon widened slightly. Come on, you, break, Naruto half-ordered, half-pleaded in his mind as he dodged first one of his own kunai that Orochimaru threw back, and then an extended limb punch from the snake. He hit Kusanagi again, and this time the indentation definitely grew, and a tiny notch appeared in the blade itself. All right, Uzumaki couldn't help but exclaim, taking his staff blade in both hands. He swung a powerful overhead strike, aiming for the break in the sword as it rotated towards his stomach. Rasenblade. Naruto roared instinctively as the 2 swords connected. He pressed down hard, and for an instant Kusanagi pushed back. Then, with an echoing clang, the chakra blade carved through the steel one. The 2 halves of the grass cutter tumbled away, the hilt dropping to the turf, while the severed blade continued on its disrupted path, scoring an incidental hit on the teen's left side. Naruto ignored the injury, turning to face the Sannin squarely, with a look of triumph. But his pride quickly faded to confusion at the amused smirk on Sasuke's lips. That, and a slight rustling triggered his training, and Naruto threw himself to the side. The fragment of Kusanagi slid into his back between his ribs and sliced cleanly out the front of his chest. His random dodge saved his life, preventing the broken blade from cutting his heart, but it still passed through his left lung. Unfortunately, the broken parts of Kusanagi's blade are only good for 1 attack, Orochimaru noted as the sword shard vanished into the deepening twilight, but it doesn't matter too much. The main portion of the grass cutter floated back into view, and it lengthened and shifted until the blade had resumed its original form. Naruto watched with a despondent look, clutching the exit wound in his chest, gasping as blood poured into his damaged lung. You should feel a little happy, the Sannin noted openly. According to legend, only 2 beings have ever damaged Kusanagi before, and one of them was a god and the other was a demon. Though I suppose you are somewhat demonic yourself. I can't fight 2 of them again, Naruto thought, especially since these wounds aren't regenerating. I'm not fast enough, and I don't think I can take any more hits like that. I think it is time to end this, Orochimaru said with sincerely portrayed false kindness. I need something more, Naruto stepped back, glaring despite his pain. I need that. He threw Kitsune weakly at Orochimaru, the chakra projection fading from the staff blade as it flew. Then he took his hand away from his wound and began signing. Tatsu, Inu, Tora, Ushi, Saru, Kitsune. His fingers moved faster than any of his previous techniques, as this art was now built into his genetic code. I-N-E, Tatsu, Kitsune. He finished the 30th seal an instant before Kusanagi reached him again, and shouted, Ascendant Fox Jutsu. A wave of visible silver chakra rolled off his body, temporarily interrupting the connection between the snake and the Jian, and sending the thin sword flying. As the yellow-gold fur erupted on the exposed portions of his torso, Naruto's injuries healed, both as a product of the transformation and from his unnatural healing kicking into overdrive. He flexed the claws on his left hand, grinned with the vulpine teeth under his muzzle, and summoned the fox talisman weapon back to his right hand without even a word or gesture. 3 tails grew out behind him, 1 of flesh and 2 of energy. Orochimaru took back control of his own weapon, and sent it shooting towards Naruto faster than it had previously moved. But the transformed Tokujo batted it aside easily with his free hand, and leaped horizontally at the body thief. The Sannin dodged sinuously, trying to find an escape while also repositioning Kusanagi. But as the grass cutter drifted up behind Naruto, his nostrils flared and the 2 tails of silver chakra stuck. They batted the blade back and forth between them, keeping it from getting past Naruto. How? Orochimaru demanded anxiously. I can hear and smell it. Naruto's pointed ears twitched as he answered. The serpent frowned and listened, but could not hear the movement of the blade over the sunset breezes. I'll have to take your word for it, Sasuke's possessor noted, punching out at the teen's fox snout, while sending the blade high, trying to get above the reach of his extensions. Naruto's response was to flip forward, causing the fist to hit his leaf shield and the thick skull underneath, hurting Orochimaru's hand far more than Uzumaki's head. At the same time, this kept his tails in range of the Jian, and they slammed the sword in unison, sending it back towards the earth. Cyclone spikes, spark darts, stone bullets, Orochimaru unleashed the 3 weak attacks rapid fire, hoping to hurt Naruto or at least keep him off balance as he completed his acrobatics. Stone Jacket, Naruto activated the trapping technique to swallow up all of the projectiles, though it was cracked by the electrical jutsu. The Vulpine ninja landed with his right foot on Kusanagi's hilt, and he sheathed Kitsune while staring down the renegade thoughtfully. Then he lifted both of his hands before him, cupping his fingers slightly. Green chakra began to spin before them. In gaining his Kekkei Genkai, Naruto had somehow learned to forge his father's jutsu out of wind chakra directly, instead of creating the Rasengan, and injecting the elemental energy afterwards. He created the sphere slightly larger than normal, though not quite into the Odama Rasengan range. Then he shifted his foot aside, and drove the orb down. Fuyuten, Rasengan, he growled, pressing the orb into the hilt and guard of the Jian. Kusanagi resisted momentarily, but the sharpened chakra began to slice into it. A few seconds later, there was a small crater in the field, and all that was left of the legendary grass cutter was just over half of the blade. Orochimaru's eyes narrowed and he shuddered in rage. But Uzumaki was not intimidated in the slightest, and he charged towards the body thief again. Claws to fangs, the Sannin intoned, and his fingernails transformed into snake's teeth, dripping with venom, and he directed them at the incoming Tokujo. But Naruto's own claws lashed out, snapping the jutsu fangs, scattering them. The leaf fighter buried his fist in Sasuke's stomach, almost faster than the Sharingan could detect, and certainly faster than the dojutsu's user could block. He swept Orochimaru's legs, and as the Sannin fell, caught him backhand in the jaw, sending him flying. That is an intriguing transformation. The renegade slurred the words slightly due to the pain in his jaw. I wonder how it relates to my new toy. It is another of the ancient jutsu I liberated. But don't worry, I have already tested this one. So it won't have any unexpected results like last time. Naruto closed the gap again as Orochimaru started signing, but this time the Sannin did not dodge or hop away. He broke into a full retreat, while continuing to craft his jutsu. After the first 20 seals, he stopped, and an aura of red energy began to flow around him, deflecting Uzumaki. The blonde-furred teen paced before the cocoon, anxiously aware how fast his altered state was draining his chakra. For good measure he reached into the pocket containing his food pills, only to find one of the attacks had cut through and the pouch was empty. As he tried to decide if he should stay in his fox form, now that Kusanagi was gone, the shell around the renegade cracked. Ninja art, Soul Revelation Jutsu, Orochimaru announced in his own voice, as the chakra barrier disintegrated. What stood there no longer looked anything like Sasuke. He appeared to be made up of 3 white large snakes, one for each arm, and the third as the upper part of his torso, neck, and head. That main serpent's face also looked like Orochimaru's original face, more or less. His legs ended in 2 taloned feet, also covered his white scales instead of flesh. The whole creature was 50% taller than Sasuke, and towered over Naruto. Do you like it? The snake asked in 3-part harmony. The soul revelation allows me to assume the form of my soul shell, without needing to leave my body. His right arm lashed out, much faster than before, and sent Naruto sprawling. Uzumaki recovered quickly, and tore 2 large chunks out of the limb before Orochimaru could retract it. But there was no skin, muscle, or blood under the scales, and the damage healed almost instantly. The soul cannot be harmed by physical attacks. Orochimaru taunted his opponent mildly, punching the younger man down to the ground. If this was my real soul shell, and you were a real shinobi, you might be able to seal me away, but neither of those apply here. He swung again, and this time his fangs clipped Naruto. The tagged arm went rigid with pain, and Naruto swallowed a second curative, this time with much less effect. My soul venom isn't like other poisons. But I suppose between that generic antivenom and your regenerative powers you will probably survive. Rasengan, Naruto countered, still slightly weak. The sphere dug into Orochimaru's chest, but again failed to hit anything substantive. And when Uzumaki darted back, his head clearing, the Sannin was again uninjured already. The fox form Tokujo drew Kitsune, and slammed the staff blade as hard as he could into Orochimaru's left wrist, as the snake tried to bite him again with that arm. Naruto was hoping bludgeoning might have some effect where slashing did not. But the body thief powered through the counterstrike and bowled the leaf shinobi over. Doton, Stone Claw's jutsu, Naruto tried to buy himself some time and space to think. But because he tried to use the jutsu without hand seals, only 3 claws appeared. Uzumaki briefly wondered if this was how other people felt when they fought him. Orochimaru slipped around 2 of the claws, and smashed the 3rd when it grabbed him. Kaiten, Fireball Jutsu, the Sannin announced, and the flames emerged from the snake's mouth that served as his right hand. The flames failed to burn the Ascendant Fox, and the teen used the time to form the Raisin Blade on Kitsune again. He stepped forward, his actions masked by the flames, and sliced off the head of the fire-breathing reptile arm. The severed soul shell part melted as it fell, and a new head extended from the odd white structure of Orochimaru's being. Then his left arm whipped across the staff blade, knocking it out of Naruto's hand. The teen started to call for his weapon, but the Sannin's restored right arm looped around his arms and torso, and began to steadily crush him. The renegade's free arm punched the younger man in the stomach, one of his fangs scraping him. Uzumaki lost control of the jutsu as his breath left him, and reverted to his normal form. Well, this is a little disappointing, the 3-headed snake offered, this form just makes everything too easy. I guess it is time to end this. His left hand scooped up the remaining piece of Kusanagi's blade, and aimed the inert yet still very sharp metal at Naruto's neck. Across the field, the 2 kunoichi both tensed to move. Can you see a way to deal with that thing? Sakura asked angrily. Yes, Hinata answered simply. The broken sword began to descend, and the 2 women prepared to break their promise. But Orochimaru suddenly stopped, shuddering. His center and left heads both turned to look at the horizon, incidentally moving the broken sword away from Naruto. None of the 3 teens were snake experts, but they could still see the undiluted shock on the serpents. What? Orochimaru hissed. No. That's not possible. No. His grasp around Naruto loosened, and the young man barely recovered in time to land on his feet. The white form of his soul shell melted away, leaving his body, Sasuke's body, still standing there, staring into the distance. No, he hissed one more time, turning on Uzumaki in a rage. Jiraiya stepped gingerly over the tripwire and carefully placed his foot between the 2 pressure pads on the other side. He crouched to avoid the second, neck-level cord, and lightly hopped over to the clear space. I'd like to think you a slipping old friend, he told the cave, as if its creator could hear him, but it is more likely you use this level of trap to kill the inept, and lull the skilled into a false sense of superiority. I don't intend to fall for that trick, either. The only Sannin, who looked the proper age, slid forward carefully, doing his level best not to disturb the sand on the floor any more than he had to. He had tested the walls and the ceiling, but they were altered to resist attempts to stand on them with chakra, and had been made so unstable that using mechanical means to traverse them would have caused a massive cave-in. As would setting off most of the traps. So Minato's teacher took it slow, using jutsu to enhance his senses. As he crept down the tunnel, he suddenly heard a slight and familiar hissing noise. Glancing around anxiously, he found the source, a tiny hole in the floor with sand spilling into it. Jiraiya quickly reached into his pack and drew out a single marble. He flicked it precisely, and the tiny orb plugged up the pipe. Now that's a little more like it, he added silently, wondering what would have happened if he had not stopped the flow of the sand. After he was past it, he heard a sputtering sound from the blocked drain, and his eyes widened. He glanced back, and could see the marble shaking slightly where it was lodged in the hole, as if it were under pressure. Nice, he applauded his former teammate as he took off running, let the sand go down, trigger one trap. Stop the flow of air completely, trigger another trap. The marble shot out of the trap, shattering against the roof. Following close behind was a high-pressure water stream, and the cavern shook when it hit the ceiling. The liquid continued to impact the weakened stones above, and afterwards fell to the sand, which quickly became saturated. With its limit reached, the water began to flow downwards, towards the fleeing pervert. As it started to catch up with him, Jiraiya could feel the heat pouring off the near-boiling water. He picked up speed, his careful jog becoming a heedless run. He was further encouraged to hurry by a loud rumbling behind him. He started signing as he ran, no longer worried about what he might do to the already collapsing cavern. As he completed the last sign, he turned suddenly to face the hybrid avalanche, flood. Earth release, stone barricade. He swung his hands up, and a thick wall of rock rose up between the Sannon and the trap. He kept pushing the sturdier stone up to compress the deliberately destabilized ceiling. Jiraiya heard a dull crash as the deluge of water and rock hit the barrier, but it held. The walls and ceiling on his side of the barricade crumbled slightly, but did not trigger another catastrophic collapse. The Toad Sage sighed in relief, and took stock of his situation. He estimated he had run almost a mile, but did not know how much further he had to go to find his unknown goal. I just hope there is another way out, Jiraiya commented to the tunnel. It will take forever to drill out through that, and that's assuming it settles. With no other immediate options, he turned and continued deeper underground. Jiraiya pulled the dart out of his palm, then swallowed another of the antidote pills he had brought with him. He had expected Orochimaru would make extensive use of poison, but the sheer volume of the toxic traps still surprised the third Hokage's student. Mists, darts, sprays, the serpent Sannon had every angle covered and recovered. In addition, poison was frequently added to more mundane traps, like the cobra venom on the smashing walls, kept virulent by a jutsu. As he waited for the curative to kick in, the legendary pervert stared deeper into the cave, focusing chakra into his eyes. The corridor had become gradually smoother, as if it had been crafted, or at least altered, by human hands. Now, a few dozen feet ahead, just beyond the edge of his electric lantern's glow, the tunnel split in two. He glided slowly forward, being extra careful while the feeling returned to his extremities. I'm surprised this is the first split, Jiraiya noted. I expected you would have made a maze down here. Unless it is a maze, and it is just this far between branches. The thought made him pause again. I've already been in here 6 or 7 hours, he decided, and then looked at his watch, or 10. So maybe I should take a break and have some shadow clones scout ahead. Shadow clone jutsu. Jiraiya split off 2 copies, who each took one of the paths. They moved with even greater care than the original had, knowing that it would not take much of a trap to destroy them. Then the real Sannon lowered himself to the floor, and extracted a jutsu-sealed bento box from his backpack. Inside sat a beautiful cheeseburger and a mound of fried shoestring potatoes, still warm and fresh thanks to his technique. I'll never understand why that jutsu isn't more popular, he commented to the cavern again, after savoring the first bite. He poured himself a cup of tea, also maintained at the right temperature, and appeared to relax as he ate his dinner. After the initial fork, the clones encounter numerous other splits in the cave. Each time they would duplicate again. Many of the paths were dead ends, in some cases literally as the copies were destroyed by some of the more subtle traps. Other times the tunnels would merge back together. One clone had encountered the skeleton of a tiger or other large cat. In the end, all the remaining routes eventually converged on a single expansive room, with a large, ornate door in the opposite wall. It was in this cavern that the real Jiraiya now stood, staring at the portal. Those seals are fairly impressive, he told his fallen teammate, as he popped a food pill into his mouth, but the knot that binds them together is too obvious. It must be some other kind of trap. Despite this realization, the Toad Sage could find nothing out of the ordinary about the tag containing the central seal. It was not tied to anything, nor was it on a central plate. After studying it for a few minutes, Jiraiya had a new idea. It is almost as if this is to keep whatever is on the other side of the door in, he mused, rather than keep whoever was in here out. Is this your last resort? Do you have something sealed back there that you would only want let out if you thought you had no other choice? The one obvious choice chilled Jiraiya to the core. He couldn't have captured the Six-Tails chameleon on his own, could he? The Sannon pondered silently. No, not even Orochimaru is that good. But the chameleon supposedly had a Jinchuriki, so Orochimaru could have caught her. That would make sense. Unleashing the demon or trading it to the Akatsuki would both be suitable last resorts for that snake. The Toad Sage examined the seals again, and decided he might have jumped to conclusions. The barriers would not have held a Bayu. Or at least he hoped he was right about that. His attempts to probe beyond the door failed, and he was too curious to wait. Jiraiya stood before the door, and reached for the paper anchoring the seal. His eyes narrowed slightly and he exhaled to prepare himself, as he tore the tag free. A handful of the other seals exploded weakly, throwing the elder Jonin back and kicking up a huge cloud of dust. As the sediment settled, he could see a figure step forward. The newcomer had spiky white hair, red robes, and a headband with the kanji for oil on it. Well, who is this handsome devil? Jiraiya demanded smoothly, facing himself. The copy did not speak, but instead threw an uppercut at the original's jaw. Jiraiya slid around the attack, and attempted to bury his fist in the duplicate's stomach, but the clone dodged as well. The real sage attempted to sweep his opponent's legs, hoping the non-standard move would confuse the attacker. Instead, the clone hopped over his leg, and launched a snap kick at Jiraiya's lowered head. The Sannin shifted his weight and raised his arm, taking the blow on his left shoulder instead of his left temple. This appears to be the same jutsu Team Guy encountered when the Akatsuki captured the Kazekage. Naruto's teacher decided, if I remember correctly, those things were tougher than Shadow Clone. Normal attacks didn't even hurt those guys, but one really good blow and they went down. Maybe a distraction with Shadow Clones, or a summoning jutsu. As he formulated strategies, another part of Jiraiya's brain looked at the faded scroll and thought, I wonder if Orochimaru stole this from the Akatsuki, or if they stole it from him. The clone appeared to be unbothered by such introspection. It simply pressed the attack, launching the real Leaf Shinobi's favorite 1-2 punch combo. Jiraiya recognized the move, and blocked the left jab easily enough, but stopping the right cross put more strain on his already injured left shoulder. The Toad Sage hopped back twice, biting his thumb. He signed quickly, then ducked low to press his palm to the stone. Summoning jutsu, he proclaimed, calling out for Gamauno with his chakra. But the martial artist Toad did not appear, and Jiraiya felt his chakra twist and then shatter. A summoning seal. He looked around for the symbol that blocked the contract, but could not see it. The Toad Sage decided it must have been buried in the floor or the walls, possibly both. The duplicate stepped in during the moment of distraction, and thrust its right palm into Jiraiya's chest hard enough to crack ribs. Then the cave guardian grabbed his shirt and flung him towards the wall. The Sannin twisted around as he fell horizontally, getting his legs between himself and the wall. He landed on it with his fingers crossed, and looked up at his evil twin. Shadow Clone Juts. The statement was cut off in shock at seeing his enemy making the same motion. 4 more instances of Jiraiya appeared, 2 flanking the original and 2 guarding Orochimaru's creation. So you can copy my jutsu too? Jiraiya pondered, and the silent duplicate did not answer. That's right, Neji reported his opponent could even use his Byakugan arts, also like a shadow clone. The 2 sets of weaker copies charged one another, and rapidly exploded in a display of symmetrical violence. In the meantime, Jiraiya began to gather chakra into his right palm, spinning it into a turbulent blue orb. He considered hiding the Rasengan, but decided the duplicate would probably be aware of that trick as well. The copy created a Rasengan of its own and stalked slowly forward. Jiraiya hopped back down to the floor, and walked sideways, keeping his distance from the clone. He prepared to pour more chakra into the Rasengan, but held back, expecting the copy would do the same if acted too early. They sprang forward in unison, as if expecting to catch the other off guard. A few feet before they met, the real human began to reinforce his jutsu. But the enemy clone did the same, and the Toad Sage noted with a shiver of fear that his opponent's orb was more rapidly becoming larger and denser. Of course, this thing doesn't have to worry about saving chakra for later, Jiraiya told himself. Their Rasengans met and his exploded. The duplicate's sphere lasted a moment longer, and shredded the pervert's right fingertips, before the concussion blew them apart. Jiraiya's hand shuddered from the pain, and he looked down, seeing the glimpse of the last bone in his middle finger. I have to find a way to beat this thing, he pondered, and I can't do it like Guy's team did. I'm too far past my prime to just decide to become stronger. Which means I'll have to come up with some way to trick it. Except it know what I know, can do anything I can do. Other than talking, apparently. But there has to be another way. Is there some jutsu that will hurt him more than it hurts me? Jiraiya ducked under a right jab, and decided the blow to his chest might have dislocated a rib instead of cracking it. He countered with an uppercut at the clone's chin, but missed. The imposter answered with a knee to the Sannin's side, just below his injured rib. What can I do against a chakra construct? The sage tried to plan his attack as he was pushed backwards. Well, if I think of it like that, I guess there is always that jutsu. But would I expect me to do that? It is a long shot, at best. If I try it, and he dodges or counters, I might as well just lay down and let him kill me. On the other hand, if it works, I'll have him. He signed, NE, holding onto the chakra formation tightly as he launched a spinning backfist at his opponent's temple. The copy absorbed the attack with his left wrist, and then aimed a kick at Jiraiya's knees. As he retreated, the proud pervert signed 2 more times, but these 2 seals were decoys, designed to make it appear as if he were preparing a lightning jutsu. He continued to draw in his chakra, have discovered years before that a single rat seal made this jutsu somewhat more safe and efficient. He blocked another kick, feeling his energy reach its peak, and begin to rapidly drop. The facsimile interrupted its taijutsu barrage with a quick, weak fire jutsu, and Jiraiya slammed his forearms together, catching the inferno in his reinforced sleeves. Despite the flame-retardant nature of his uniform, the Sannin still felt his skin crack and blister from the heat. His jutsu complete, he surged forward and grabbed the copy's right arm in his left hand. He thrust his right palm forward, and the clone prepared to block, but the Toad Sage's attack was not a physical one. Ninja art, negative chakra jutsu, he announced, and the column of black energy struck Orochimaru's creation square in the chest. Jiraiya shuddered as the feedback of the technique drained the strength from his muscles, and the clone pulled away from his weakened grip. The effect on the duplicate was much more pronounced. It jerked randomly as it stepped back, and the area of its torso where the inverted energy had hit flickered in and out of existence. It tried to kick again, but fell backwards, no longer able to maintain its balance with only one leg. It fell down onto one knee, its face pointed towards Jiraiya, but its eyes unable to focus. You didn't figure that one out, did you? Jiraiya asked darkly. He took the copy's head in his hands, favoring his uninjured left hand slightly. Then he slammed his knee into the clone's nose as hard as he could. The construct fell back and began to fade away. Not exactly like the ones Guy Squad fought, he decided, dropping roughly into a sitting position. The Sannin first consumed a food pill, and then took out bandages and ointment, and began to treat his injured fingers. He checked his rib carefully, and decided it was a light crack rather than a dislocation, and that there was nothing he could do about it. His self-ministrations ended, the Toad Sage rose unsteadily to his feet, and approached the door again. With the central seal gone, it was a relatively simple matter to clear the rest away, though he was lightly shocked when his numbed right hand brushed a tag that he did not mean to touch. Once the path was clear, the author grasped the ornate handles, and, with a grunt of effort, pulled the large, reinforced doors towards him. He braced himself to be overwhelmed by the 6 tails or its shape-shifting host. There was no demon on the other side of the portal. Instead, an even larger chamber sat on the other side of the barricade, so huge the light from his torch barely dented the darkness. As his eyes adjusted, he realized he was looking at a small town or village. It was ancient, probably from the era when the Bayu and their ilk controlled the continent, and chakra was still considered magic. It appeared to be empty, no lights or sounds reached him. Despite this, it was fairly intact, only here and there had time or earthquakes claimed a few of the stone buildings. Okay, Jiraiya exhaled, suitably impressed, but what are you hiding down here, my old friend? His eyes settled on the center of town, on easily the largest building, some sort of temple or castle. Whatever it is, I'm sure your ego wouldn't let you work on it anywhere else. He trotted down the ramp as quickly as he could, his energy starting to recover from the negative chakra jutsu. Halfway down, he heard the twang of a crossbow, and barely ducked under the bolt that flew by at head level. He looked down, and saw a slight impression in the rocky floor. Right, you wouldn't lay off the traps, even this close, Jiraiya noted, and he proceeded with renewed caution. He reached the bottom of the slope unscathed, and padded towards the church, having decided the structure must have had a religious purpose, rather than a military one. Not long after he passed the first set of composite homes, a new noise reached his ears and his eyes widened. On either side of him, the baying of hounds drew swiftly closer. Jiraiya leaned against the inner wall of the ruined blacksmith's shop, closing his eyes against the pain. He tightened the bandage over the chunk that had been torn out of his left thigh, but the bleeding only slowed, it did not stop. He wondered if that was a good thing, as the blood loss was probably the main thing keeping him from succumbing to the last 3 poisons he had been subjected to, now that he was out of antidote pills. The dogs, giant, nearly feral creatures, had chased him through the city as he whittled down their pack. The Sannin wondered if it was just coincidence that they had driven him into so many of Orochimaru's snares, or if they had been trained to do so. Are these things able to find enough food to survive down here? Jiraiya asked the snake, or do you keep them in chakra stasis until they are needed? After he had killed the 17th of the 23 canines, the rest got the message and backed off. Still he could hear and smell them, prowling around the perimeter, too afraid to attack further, yet either too well trained or too vindictive to just let him go. The sage took stock. He was only a block away from the temple. Other than the large injury in his leg, he had almost 24 new, minor cuts and punctures, from either the dogs or the traps. He clenched his fists to focus, and the pain in his fingertips flared again. But he was thankful, it helped clear his mind of the poison fog descending on his thoughts. Almost there, he said, stepping back into the street, I hope. He banished away any thoughts that the temple might be the wrong place, or that it might be the portal to another system of tunnels. He strode confidently forward, counting on his bravado to keep the surviving hounds at bay. When he reached the temple, he felt the presence of the dogs fade away, and he took that as validation of his choice. After checking for traps and finding none, he placed his palms on the double doors and shoved them firmly inwards. They opened without even a whisper of protest. Jiraiya picked up his lantern, and shined it inside. The church was mostly empty, except for a single altar in the center. He limped towards the stone pedestal, no longer acting for the beasts. As he approached, he could see there was some sort of depression in the center, and the sides were carved with advanced fuinjutsu and ninjutsu seals. Recognizing some of his former comrades' preferred arts, he hastened his uneven steps. Jiraiya gasped in surprise when he saw what was in the stone casket. It was a single human body, a male, with skin so pale white it almost looked blue in the shadow of the box. He had stringy, jet black hair, extending past his shoulders. The man was shorter than the toad sage, and much more slender. He wore simple white robes, and though his eyes were closed, the purple marks around them cemented for Jiraiya the fact that, had they been open, they would have been yellow and slitted. Orochimaru, the sage began to laugh, and part of him recognized the intoxication as a symptom of his poisoning. He choked the mirth down, and began examining the buyer with his eyes and his jutsu. It is you, he commented in amazement, the real you, your original body. That's what Sasuke meant. This is your last resort, because even if whatever body you are currently in is destroyed and you cannot find a new one in time, your soul will just snap back here and you can start all over again. He marveled briefly at the suspension jutsu that maintained the renegade's body without letting it age. But then he shook his head, and moved his attention to the jutsu protecting the snake's form. This must have taken you months, maybe even years. Jiraiya traced the web of connected seals, both permanently etched into the stone and in tags. The wards were powerful, precise, and glaringly obvious. They eloquently conveyed Orochimaru's message, touch me, or even get too close, and you will die. Painfully. The loyal Sannin tried to find a way to unravel the protections, but the key seals were on the inside. You must have placed the final seals from in there, before putting yourself into stasis, the toad sage told his unhearing teammate, ingenious. If I had Hinata's eyes, Naruto's chakra supply, and Hiroko's natural talent, I might be able to find a way in. But as it stands. He smiled briefly, mentioning the Cursebreaker's name reminded him of their occasional, past dalliances. But his sliver of happy recollection quickly melted. Jiraiya took out his cellular, and predictably, had no signal. He signed 3 times, sending his energy into the phone to enhance the reception. Hoping the 2 bars he now had would be enough, he hit number 1 on his speed dial. The phone on the other end rang 4 times, and the Jonin sage was afraid it would go to voicemail. But just before the last ring, there was a click as the connection was established. Jiraiya, what is it? Tsunade started without greeting, her voice dangerous. Is it a bad time? He asked weakly, unable to muster his normal self-assurance. I just found out that Sakura and Hinata left the village yesterday, without authorization, the Hokage answered more evenly, worried by his tone of voice. I wonder why that could be. he queried, but his soft intonation hid the undercurrent of meaning in his words. I suspect it has something to do with Naruto's sudden vacation, she told him with a sigh. Then she turned her attention back to him, further agitated by his lack of a glib reply. Anyway, why are you calling? Are you in trouble? In a manner of speaking, he smiled as he said it. I guess the reason I'm calling is to apologize. You asked me not to die, but it looks like that won't be possible. Jiraiya, she demanded anxiously, what does that mean? Sasuke's message, he started to explain, Shikamaru and I decoded it. Snake's last resort, and some coordinates. I'm there, now. What is it? Tsunade's emotions warred in her words. What did you find? Orochimaru. His original body. His contingency against being killed. That's great, she sounded cautiously optimistic, if we bring him back here. Won't work, he cut her off, seals are too much. Even the Cursebreaker couldn't do it. Have to kill him here. But it will take a sacrifice. What are you saying? She barked, anger covering her fear. Seals protect him, and kill anyone who gets too close. Jiraiya's breath was growing short, but he made a mistake. He assumed no one would be willing to die to kill him. The right type of jutsu, like say an Odama Rasengan, could cut through the seals and still kill Orochimaru. But it would be a suicide mission, the seals would tear apart the attacker. That's why I'm going to end it now. Don't you dare, she ordered furiously, as the Hokage, I'm ordering you to stay there and wait for backup. You hear me, Jiraiya? It's too late, he told her gently, I'm already dying. Getting through all of Orochimaru's traps was too much for this old body. At this point, it's a race to see if the poisons kill me before I bleed out. Even if I could survive, part of the tunnel collapsed behind me, so it could take you days to reach me. And by then it might be too late. Though he was thinking about his knucklehead student and the possible duel, soon it took it to mean too late for Jiraiya. Besides, he continued, this is my responsibility. Orochimaru was my teammate. He was my teammate too, she insisted, tears running down her cheeks in despair. But you are Hokage now, he countered, you couldn't afford to do this, even if you were in my place. He coughed harshly, as one of the toxins hit his lungs. I don't have much time left, he informed her, so, I'm sorry Tsunade. Tell Naruto and Hinata to take good care of one another. I wonder what would have happened, if I had had the courage to knuckle down and ask you out seriously. Realizing he was babbling, he allowed the phone to slip from his grip, clouds of chakra forming in his hands as he took another step closer. Jiraiya, Jiraiya, her anguished cries echoed around the church, and a 6-foot diameter Rasengan coalesced between his hands. I'll see you on the other side, old friend, he told Orochimaru's comatose form. Odama, Rasengan, he gasped, falling forward, putting his weight onto the chakra sphere. The seals reacted instantly, and lighting, fire, wind, and darkness burned, tore, and flooded into his body. Jiraiya focused all of his remaining chakra and attention into the orb, keeping it stable, forcing it through the barriers. The spiraling chakra shredded some of the shields, and slipped around others. The Toad Sage's hair was gone, melted away, when the Rasengan finally pierced the shell. Jiraiya grunted, and pressed down with his arms, feeling his air-damaged muscles rip deeper from the effort. The last resistance of the barriers gave way, and the Rasengan plunged into Orochimaru's chest. Goodbye, Tsunade. Orochimaru's eyes snapped open, and an inhuman howl issued from his throat, as Minato's jutsu destroyed his ribs, and then the organs they protected. The Serpent Sannin's scream cut off, as the last breath was ejected from his throat, and his eyes emptied of all feeling. As the renegade's body died, so did Jiraiya's strength run out, and what was left of the Toad Sage collapsed on the altar, the sputtering remains of the seals fading around him. Jiraiya. Tsunade's scream echoed from his phone into the ancient church. That will be all for this video, be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.